Senator Peters. Senator Murray.
Thank you very much, Chair Hoven. Look forward to working with you on this really important committee. You know, Commissioner McCarty, the FDA has a really important job to do. Lives literally are at stake, and that work requires the utmost diligence and care and commitment to following the science and uploading FDA's gold standard. We all expect to walk into the drugstore and know that what we are buying has passed a safety and efficacy standard, and we have to be assured of that, and we have to be assured that the work's been done, that we don't have to question that. So I don't think it's careful leadership when you do mass fire 1 in 5 people across FDA, only to frantically then bring some back because you didn't stop and think 2 seconds about whether those jobs were actually important. We really, Mr. Chairman, cannot cheap out on the FDA and expect to maintain that gold standard that means that people know that drugs are safe. We can't just cut and hope nobody gets sick when you're slow to issue a recall, or hope no one needs that medicine that had its approval delayed, or hope there isn't another infant formula issue while your staff are getting fired or getting rehired or wherever they are. This work really takes investments. This committee knows that, and it expects expert staff, like the people that have been shoved out the door. Drug approvals are already getting delayed. Food and drug safety inspections are lagging behind. We are going in the wrong direction fast. We still have yet to see from you a full budget request. That is unacceptable. You are now testifying that the budget proposes to slash FDA by more than 11%. That's actually news to all of us, and I'll tell you right now, it is not going to fly. It's reckless, and it's not going to happen as long as I have anything to say about it. Now, Commissioner McCary, when it comes to your mass firing of FDA employees, in April you said, quote, "I can tell you there were no cuts to scientists or inspectors." Well, that is not true. I think Senator Ossoff covered that, and I think the point here is that all of this firing and rehiring, I don't see how that's efficient. Frankly, it kind of shows that you don't know what you're doing and that you're breaking things and the process here. And so let me ask you a question, and hopefully it is an easy one for you. Does it save taxpayer dollars to fire staff who work in centers that are fully funded by user fees, not taxpayer dollars, yes or no?
Nice to see you again, Senator Murray. You asked me to do an assessment of the staff when I came here for my confirmation hearing. And I hear that you're criticizing me for bringing back some individuals after the cuts that I was not a part of.
No, I'm saying that's good. I'm just saying in the long run, this has been very inefficient. But my question to you is not about that. And I know you've covered it with several other members. So does it save taxpayer dollars to fire staff who work in centers that are fully funded by user fees, not taxpayer dollars? Is that efficient? Does it save money?
The cuts were to HR, IT, communications. There were 2,600
But they're funded by
HR
user
staff.
fees. They're funded by user fees.
In part.
It is not saving any
In
money.
part.
Well, many of the staff you fired were in centers that are actually fully funded by user fees. You know that, correct?
So if we have 2,600 HR people, do you want me to not make any cuts
No,
to
I'm
that number?
asking you a specific question about the centers that are fully funded by user fees.
That's one center. It's the tobacco center.
Well,
and so
okay, well, let me just say.
You said we can't just keep cut and cut. We can't keep hiring and hiring. The agency doubled since 2007. So let me ask you, what is the right number of employees?
No, you're
at the
here to
HR?
answer my questions,
Okay.
sir, and I'm going to ask some more. Without critical support staff you fired, inspectors cannot plan their trips. They cannot do their jobs. I want to ask you, what % of planned inspections has FDA missed since those April 1st firings?
In the 12 labs that we have that evaluate food products in the food inspection realm, there are no, as of last week, I just did a check, there are no backlogs. They are running at 100% efficiency. There are no drug approval delays, despite the, what people want to attribute.
That is not what I have been told. I have been told, and I would like you to go back and check and report back to us, because we know that some of the planned inspections at these that were supposed to take place have been missed. And to me, why that's so important, if there is not inspections, the public doesn't have the information that they need. I am going to run out of time, so I want to move on.
Yeah, there were no cuts to inspectors.
Will you go back and check for me, please?
Absolutely.
I understand, and by the way, inspector's one thing, but if you don't have the support staff to make sure that they know
Yeah, but
where they're going.
2,600
Okay.
HR staff and procurement
Okay,
staff?
I understand that the FOIA staff producing documents related to ongoing litigation by the Children's Health Defense, Senator Kennedy's organization, were shielded from the RIF, while other FOIA staff are responsible for FOIA responses at other FDA centers were targeted for termination. Is that true?
That's not true, Senator. We have our FOIA staff. They continue to work at the FDA. I've made sure that all the FOIA staff at the FDA are doing their job. We are also using AI to reduce the burden on that staff.
Well, for the record, my understanding is that the Children's Health Defense FOIA staff were not fired when other ones were.
All the FOIA staff are there.
And that seems like a real conflict of interest to me, considering that the Secretary's extensive history with that organization, Children's Health Defense, and his goal to remove authorizations for vaccines. So I just want that on
It's
the
not
record.
true.
Well,
All FOIA staff are in place.
okay, so if a study came out saying that people who took a certain medication experience a certain rate of, quote, serious adverse events, but the study's authors refused to say what they were counting as an adverse event, would that raise serious questions for you about the study's validity?
Yes, Senator. So I have the natural inquisition of a scientist that's done a lot of research, so I would want to see the underlying data, yes.
Okay. Well, I am, of course, talking about the sham study from the Ethics and Public Policy Center. It's an anti-abortion group. It's bankrolled by extremists. They fought to overturn Roe v. Wade. And this study, if you can call it that, is unsound and has been widely panned by medical experts. But days after its release, you and Secretary Kennedy are now suggesting that we need a, quote, complete review on the safety of mifepristone. Now, to be clear, mifepristone has been proven safe and effective in more than 100 studies over 3 decades. And the people that are now pushing that bogus study and saying that mifepristone is dangerous for women are the exact same people who think that abortion is never necessary to save a woman's life and that 10-year-olds should somehow be forced into childbirth. I believe that this administration is laying the groundwork to rip away access to medication abortion across the country. This has not gotten enough attention, and I know you'd prefer to keep it that way, but I want you to know I'm not going to let that happen.
I have not seen that study, Senator, and you have not seen that study.
Well,
so how can you call it a sham bogus study? Neither of us have seen the study, the underlying data, or the methodology.
Well, actually, that's not true, but I will say this. Mr. Chairman, we have a lot of differences here. I know you came before this committee to present your side of the story, but I am very clear that laying off people, cutting budgets, is not going to improve the safety and efficacy that we count on when we go to the drugstore to get our drugs. And I know that sham studies that try to prove a point that came from a political group is not going to tell the public that they can count on the medications they count on. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Dr. Makari, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Thank you for joining us. I was pleased to see that the Secretary has made the safety of infant formula a priority for the department. Is that correct?
That's right, and the FDA will be convening the world experts on infant formula June 4th, and we're going to be having a robust discussion because parents want infant formula options with a better supply chain and without added sugar and seed oils.
Did you see a recent Consumer Reports study which found that of 41 tested infant formulas, more than 30 were found to have potentially dangerous levels of lead?
Yeah, heavy metals in infant formula is something that's getting a lot of attention, as it should, and so that is part of Operation Stork Speed to take a hard look at that, and it is one of the priorities of our infant formula roundtable at the FDA on June 4th.
And it's the Human Foods division of your agency responsible for infant formula safety, at least in large part, yes?
Yes.
Trying to make sure I understand some of the relevant personnel decisions given the concern that families in Georgia have about the safety of infant formula, the safety of the food supply. James Jones, the Deputy Commissioner for Human Foods, submitted a resignation letter February 17th included the quotes, quote, "The indiscriminate firing of 89 staff in the Human Foods Program is beyond short-sighted. The Foods Program staff at FDA is the envy of the world in its technical, professional, and ethical standards." It goes on, "The employees fired this past weekend are the most recent hires and generally come to federal service with the most recent education and represent the future of the agency. They included staff with highly technical expertise in nutrition, infant formula, food safety response, and even 10 chemical safety staff hired to review potentially unsafe ingredients in our food supply." That was February 17th. You were asked on April 17th whether any of the personnel reductions had included personnel responsible for food safety or infant formula safety. You said, quote, "There were no cuts to scientists or reviewers or inspectors, absolutely none." You were asked on April 23rd on CNN and said, quote, again, "There were no cuts to scientists or inspectors." But then just 2 days later, an HHS spokesperson confirmed that, in fact, scientists had been fired and that you were scrambling to rehire them. Is that, did you in fact say on April 23rd there were no cuts to scientists or inspectors? Just before we get into the details, is that an accurate quote?
No scientific reviewer was cut as a part of the reduction in force.
So you said there were no cuts to scientists or inspectors. Didn't you say that?
My understanding was that there were no cuts to the scientific staff, but specifically the scientific reviewers is what I was referring to.
But you said there were,
Jim Jones
it's a very
is an
straightforward question. You
economist.
said there were no cuts to scientists or inspectors, correct?
Scientific reviewers
No,
is
you
what I was
said-
referring to. That's the vast majority of scientists there.
And
Jim
then-
Jones
and then
is an economist.
5 days before you had said there were no cuts to scientists. You said that, right?
I was referring to scientific reviewers. There are a
But
couple
scientists had been
research-
fired, correct?
There have been research scientists in some labs that have been doing some research. Some of that research is good, some of it is not good, and so there have been no cuts to scientific reviewers.
And in fact, scientists who study the safety of infant formula had been fired, correct?
I'm not aware of any scientist who studies infant formula
Well,
that has.
here's the reporting in the New York Times, which says the HHS spokesman said those employees called back had been inadvertently fired, and the decision to rehire specialists on outbreaks of food-related illnesses and those who study the safety of products like infant formula. So is this reporting accurate? Had, in fact, scientists who study outbreaks of food-related illnesses and the safety of infant formula been fired?
The reason it's not
No, it's-
accurate, Senator, is that people were not fired. They were scheduled for the reduction in force. And that was before I got there. When I got there, we did an assessment. And so some of those individuals out of the 19,000 were restored. Jim Jones was an economist, and he was upset about the Doge cuts, so he self-doged. He was not fired. I wish he would have stayed.
Have
but he
all
chose to leave.
scientists responsible for food safety and infant formula safety been rehired or reinstated?
Look, we have not reduced in force the scientific review staff. I know where you're going with this. We're not allowed.
I'm trying to
let
get
go a
clarity on your
single
statements.
person.
You said there were no cuts to scientists, and then the HHS spokesperson said, actually, there were cuts to scientists, and now we're trying to rehire them. I mean, so it gives the impression you're not sure about the personnel actions ongoing in your own agency, and that's
Again, no one was
from your
cut.
testimony
No
here
one
again
was
today.
No one was cut in the reduction of force. They were scheduled for the reduction in the future. Down the road, it has not happened yet. So the people scheduled to be cut, we did a review and found some research scientists. When I made those statements, it was very specific. I was very clear. We're talking about scientific reviewers because the trains have to run on time. And if you're concerned about
My time is up. My
backlog
time
in
is
the
up. But you were
labs-
very specific. You said there were no cuts to scientists, and then 5 days later, there were no cuts to scientists. Those are your direct quotes. There were no cuts to scientists, but there were cuts to scientists.
No, there were
correct?
no cuts to scientists because people were scheduled for the reduction in force down in the future, and the people scheduled were reevaluated, and we restored a couple research scientists, and I was referring
How
not
many?
only to them, but
How many?
to the scientific reviewers.
How many scientists responsible for preventing outbreaks of food-related illnesses and the safety of infant formula have been restored or reinstated?
There were no scientists that were in charge of preventing outbreaks that were part
I
of
didn't
the
say in
reduction.
charge.
But I mean, this is the problem in government. Somebody has a fancy sounding name like infant formula safety, and no one can ever touch them, even if they're not doing their job.
Okay, I tell you
even
what,
if
how about
it's
this?
redundant.
I'll send you, so that you can get accurate information to the committee, I'll send you some very detailed questions about this, and you'll respond in full, yes?
Yes, just keep in mind, the agency was half its size in 2007. We didn't have
But you'll
outbreaks
respond in
and
full.
rampages and food outbreaks.
Well, we had a huge infant formula safety crisis in this country just a few years ago. Do you recall that?
That was because of several problems,
Yeah,
including...
but so you will respond in full to the questions that I send you.
I'm
yes?
always happy to respond in full
Thank you
to
so much,
Senator.
Dr. McCarty. Thank you.